Good morning. It's 8 minutes after 10 on a Friday. That means it's time for the Real Estate Fix. I'm your host, Rich Szerman. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. I love it when people listen. It makes me feel really good all over. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Today we got an interesting show. There's those of you who watch the real estate market know there was just a massive judgment that came down in a case that could change everything as far as how real estate works in the United States. I don't know that it will or that it won't, but it has that feel to it. What we're calling the Sitzer case, Sitzer versus NAR out of Missouri. So we're going to talk about a lot about that today. I brought in an expert to talk to us about it, my good friend and attorney extraordinaire, and the one guy you want in your corner if you are having financial issues, attorney extraordinaire Lou Esbin, who's a friend of the show, friend of the station, friend of mine, everybody's friend. He was good enough to do a deep dive on this for us over the last couple of days. He's going to come in after the break. We're going to have a long chat about it because everybody I know in real estate is just freaking the heck out about this. Some people think the sky is falling. Some people think it means nothing, and there are a few in the middle, but we're going to talk about all that kind of stuff today. But first, before we get to that, we're going to talk about some of the housing market stuff, as I like to start every week with. And it hasn't changed a lot. The interest rate's gone down a little bit, so that's been a little helpful. So now we've receded under 8%, which is good. And the Mortgage Bankers Association calls it the biggest drop like in the last 18 years or something, which is not necessarily accurate. So it is getting a little bit better out there, and the Fed did not raise the rate at the last meeting. I still think they're going to on the next meeting, and if they don't, it'll simply be because the interest rate has done the job itself or inflation has come down more, and I don't think inflation is going to come down enough. I think we're going to get another rise in interest rates out of the Fed, but I'd like to be wrong, so that would be okay. I'm not often wrong with these things when it comes to the Fed, but I'd sure like to be because I do not need the interest rate going up any higher than it already is, and I don't think anyone else does either. Because as we've talked about before, those of people out there who say a recession is on the horizon, let me just tell you, for those of us in the real estate industry, the recession is here. There's 40% less business being done this year, 40. And as a result of that, every realtor, title person, escrow person, certainly lenders, everybody I know in real estate, we're all hurting. And the reason for that is there is just less business going on. And if you're a refi maven, there's no money going on. There's nothing happening. Nobody's refinancing their house because, as I keep talking about, because this statistic just blows me away, 70% of every single mortgage in the United States, according to our friends at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, 70% of those mortgages are at or below 4%. An additional 15% are at or below 5%. So what that means is you have 85% of every single mortgage in the United States currently being at or below 5%. And that only leaves you about 15% of the market left who are your potential sellers, in the current market. So people are selling because their life has to, or job transfer or something else in your life has come up that made you do that. But for the most part, it is problematic because the rates are just too darn high, and if that condition doesn't reverse itself in the very near future, things are going to get worse before they get better. So let's talk about the headlines. So I got a couple of headlines for you that I think kind of dictate what's going on. The first one is, and this is not necessarily true of our area, but we are definitely seeing this. According to the good people at Fortune, as of Monday of this week, the housing market is starting to crack. Sellers are cutting prices at record levels, as you can, quote, no longer price based off what where sales were, end quote. Now again, Southern California, New York, some other places, the prices have been stubbornly high, which is great for us who own houses, but for people trying to buy houses, it's brutal. And I keep saying this, when the Fed says they're trying to crush inflation, substitute the word inflation for the housing market, and you got what the Fed is essentially after. Because the housing market in the United States is anywhere, depending on who you ask, anywhere from 15 to 18% of the GDP. And that is really what's powering most of the inflationary numbers that we're seeing, and the Fed is determined to crush housing prices. And I really wish they weren't, but here we are. Anyway, home prices nationwide have just refused to drop. Existing home prices are on their 7th consecutive month of growth, according to the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index, a leading measure of home values for over 30 years. Average U.S. home prices are up nearly 6% year-to-date and 2.6% year-over-year. Remember, this is the United States as a whole. In California, we're doing a little better than that, which is well above the median full calendar year increase, that 6% year-to-date, 2.6% year-over-year, in more than 3 decades of data, according to Case-Shiller. But now we know that a crack appeared in October, and it is among sellers. This is the crack that is starting to appear. We talked about this last week a little bit and the week before. Nearly 7% of for-sale homes in the United States posted a price drop during the 4th week ending October 29th, which is the highest portion since Redfin started tracking data in 2012, and far surpasses the 3.6% of homes that lowered their price in an average month. So it's double what usually happens in an average month. The 11-year record comes as mortgage rates have steadied between 7.5 and 8 this past month. They're still about that, a little below 8. The highest they've been in 2 decades. It's important to note, however, that even with last month's drop, home prices are still up 3% year over year, according to Redfin. More mortgage rates are also largely been on the rise this year, peaking at about 8% in October. Rates did drop briefly to 7.4% on Friday of last week in reaction to a disappointing job report showing that just 150,000 jobs were created last month, which is 20,000 fewer than forecast. Rates Rates appear to be making a slow climb back to 8%, though, with Mortgage Daily News reporting mortgage rates as of Monday of this week at 7.48. They did go up a little bit and then came back a little bit, but they didn't break 8% this week, so that's a good thing. For the housing market to move again, for us to start closing that 40% volume gap that we've now lost, mortgage rates either need to come down, home prices need to drop, said Chen Foy, or I should say, home prices need to drop. And that's really where we're at. So, pardon me, that is a big problem with real estate right now, is everything is just sort of frozen. It's all just sort of locked. You got a lot of sellers who are in love with their interest rate, and I get that, and they don't want to sell. You got a lot of buyers who are terrified to go buy because the interest rate's so high, which I get, harder to qualify as well. It's not just the rates, also tightening of requirements. And you got yourself a recipe for a recession, because prices are still going up, even though the circumstances that should cause prices to go up no longer exist. The interest rate is much higher now. Houses are more expensive now, and yet the prices are still going up a little bit, and they're going to have to soften. This will not stand. They are going to have to start going the other way. I own houses. I hope I'm wrong about this, but the reality is an 8% market with prices still going up cannot possibly be sustained, and it's going to have to go the other way. So I'm telling you this now. Pay attention to which way the wind is blowing. I will say again, if you're a seller and you're selling a house and you do not have one to buy, this is your market. God bless you. This is your market. You're probably not going to see this again in your lifetime. So if you have a house to sell and you don't have one to buy, take advantage of that right now, because these circumstances will not hold. It will change. And here's an indicator of that. Foreclosure rates in all 50 states in September of 2023. Now, I watch the foreclosures very, very closely, so this data I think is super important, because I think foreclosure rates are more telling than just about anything else in the real estate market as far as where houses are going, both locally and nationally. And I'm here to tell you, in Southern California, the foreclosure rates are up about 15% just in the last month. That's just Southern California. So let's talk about the rest of the country. Foreclosure rates are once again on the rise this quarter, returning to levels not seen since the expiration of the foreclosure moratoriums over 2 years ago. According to property data provider Atom, ATTOM, who's a source you should always watch, they're great, the number of housing units with foreclosure filings in September was 37,679. And this is the big number, an 18.4% increase from the previous year. Number of foreclosures are up 18.4% nationally since this time last year. That's a lot. Like I said, in Southern California, it's only up about 15%. That's month over month, but they're climbing. Despite the current economic upturn, many homeowners are still struggling to deal with financial fallout from the pandemic. So, there are the good people at SoFi were good enough. SoFi Learn were good enough. Their website were good enough to rank all 50 states in number of foreclosures. I'm not going to read all 50 of them to you. It'll just be a geography lesson. We don't need that. But I will tell you the number of foreclosures. California right now is number 11. We have the 11th most foreclosures, which, given that we have the most amount of people, that's pretty good. But the country's most populous state ranked 11th for highest foreclosure rates once again, of its impressive 14,328,539 housing units, 14 million. 4,789 went into foreclosure, making the Golden State's foreclosure rate 1 in every 2,992 households. The counties with the most foreclosures per housing unit were, from highest to lowest, Lake County, Northern California, Trinity County, Mendocino County, Kern County, our neighbors to the north, and Plumas. Those are the counties that, as far as per capita, had the most amount of foreclosures. You know, it's Los Angeles, San Diego, Riverside, Orange County were not on that list. They will be, but they're not yet. In order of the top 5, as far as the most amount of foreclosures per capita, and this is a little surprising. Number 5 is New Jersey. Number 4 is Delaware. Number 3 is South Carolina, which I thought was interesting because there's so few people there. And if you thought South Carolina was odd, check out Maryland. Maryland is number 2 in the amount of foreclosures, and I don't know how many people are in Maryland, but it's probably the equivalent of San Diego. For the entire state. Nothing against the state. I'm sure it's lovely, but they are number 2 in the amount of foreclosures per capita. And the number 1, the gold ring winner is Nevada. Nevada has more foreclosures going on right now per capita than anybody else. So that is the story. So foreclosures are rising. The interest rate has come down a little bit. Prices are still going up a tiny bit, and volume is still continuing to fall. So what I have just described to you is what you see pre-recession, pre-bubble bursting. I don't know if it'll be a bubble. I don't know if it'll be burst. I don't know. Economists can give it whatever name they want, but a correction is coming. Prices cannot remain this high with the interest rate this high. Those two things cannot coexist. They simply cannot for any length of time. Either the interest rate needs to give, and the Fed is not showing any signs of that, They made a statement earlier this week that said they may not raise it anymore, and the reason they said that is because the market was doing it for them by itself. They didn't have to raise the interest rate or raise the Fed rate, which would raise the interest rate because the interest rate was going up on its own. Now, I think it's going to have to go up a little bit more before the end of the year, despite what we talked about last week with the 6 great economists who told us 3 said it would go up, 3 said it wouldn't. I think it is going to go up a little bit before the end of the year. We'll see, or stay where it is. Either way, it's too darn high. It's not going to get under 6%, which is what we need to do. The interest rate needs to get itself to under 6% to return to normalcy. 5.5 would be lovely. And until that happens, we're not going to see normalcy return to the market. Because if you have a 5% interest rate and you're going to a 6% interest rate or a 5.5% interest rate, you can live with that. If you're going from a 5% interest rate to an 8% interest rate, you're not doing that. Most people just aren't. So that's where we need. We need an interest rate under 6% in order to return to some sort of normalcy in the real estate market. Until then, we're going to continue to see these ridiculous lacks of volume, 30%, 40%, wherever you are in the country. It's bad. There's just not enough real estate being sold. And in the middle of that, we now throw this wonderful little hand grenade into an already ailing market, into a market that is already in recession, deeply in recession. Because whatever it is you do out there, whatever your job is, and I know I say this every week, whatever your occupation, and God bless you for whatever it is, if you lost 40% of your clientele, you'd be in a recession. If you lost 40% of your income, you'd be in a recession. And that's where we are in real estate right now. So anyone who has anything to do with real estate will already tell you this, whether the title company, escrow, whatever, we are all in trouble with this because there are so few houses moving right now. So that's got to correct itself. And until we get to some sort of normalcy, it's just going to continue to get worse. And my concern is that instead of the soft landing the Fed is aiming for, they're priming a bubble. That is my concern. And when it pops, it's going to hurt. So I hope it's not. I hope I'm wrong. But that is where the market is at. So let's do a little prep before we bring Lou in here. We're going to just talk about a couple of facts I want to lay down before we bring him in. So I want you guys to have these kind of in mind. This is just about realtors in general. There are 1.5 realtors, 1.5 million realtors in the U.S. according to NAR. 1.5 million people that are realtors. According to the Real Trends website, NAR has lost 60,000 realtors have left the business just in the first half of 2023. So of the 1.5 million that are there, 60,000 have left just in the first half of 2023. We expect another 130, according to NAR, Real Trends, NAR estimates, another 130 will leave by the end of the year. So that means we're going to lose almost 200,000 realtors by the end of the year. Out of the 1.5 million, that's a lot. Those are a lot of people who have got to go do something else to be able to pay their mortgage and feed their families. That is the recession I'm talking about. 3% loss could go, so we've lost 3% of realtors so far, and that number could go as high as 15% by mid-2024. That is going to hurt. I'm all for fewer realtors out there because I'm a realtor, so fewer competition, so I guess that's self-serving for me. But that tells you that we are in a recession. We are already in a real estate market recession. Now, it's not the prices of the houses. It's everything else that goes into real estate. Remember, 15 to 17% of our national GDP is already in recession. Now, people aren't feeling it because the housing prices haven't budged. But yeah, the freeze in the real estate market is causing this. Stuff is not moving. The average realtor does 6.3 transactions per year, according to NAR, and I take issue with that because I think that number is inflated. In California, the average realtor does 2 deals per year. Average new realtor, excuse me. But that's 6.3 transactions per year, which seems awfully low for a realtor who's got any time in the business, but high if you're only in the first year or two. The current drop as far as the number of transactions, because we were averaging about 10 per person, averaging 6.3, again, 40%. That drop is the result of during the 2008 crash. That number was 11%, and now it was 11 deals per realtor, and now that number is 6.3. So that means there are fewer deals going on right now than were going on during the 2008 crash. The median gross income for realtors in the first 2 years is $8,800. Think about that. I don't know too many places in the country you could feed yourself and keep a roof over your head for $8,800. Not to mention it costs about $2,000 a year to belong to various boards and things like that wherever you are in the country. So the median gross income for realtors in the first 2 years is $8,800. We've already lost we've lost 60,000 realtors. We're going to lose probably another 100,000 or more. Could lose as many as 200,000 by the end of the year. And it's because there's not going to be enough money in the business to keep people doing it. And that is a problem. This is a recession that already exists. So keep those numbers in mind with realtors. And when we come back, so yeah, hang with us through the break. We'll speed up when we get Lou here. But come through us a bit. We're going to talk about the case that just came down, the $1.8 billion judgment against realtors, because it's a mess, and it may very well change the way commission structures work, which is going to make that $8,800 that realtors get now in their first couple of years on average, it's going to make that seem like a dream, because it's going to get a whole lot worse if this judgment continues to stand, if NAR loses on appeal. But let's get Lou in here. We'll talk about this. So I tell you what, let's listen to the break. Let's listen to some of our some of our sponsors. We'll go to break, and when we come back, we'll have Lou Esbin in here. We'll have a whole chat about this, what they call Sitzer versus NAR. So stay through the break, and we'll have I know this sounds a little boring, but hang in, because you will see how interesting this gets once we start talking about the case, and it is a big deal. It may very well affect how houses get sold in the United States, but we'll see. So hang through the break, and we're back. Lou Esbin. Hello, everybody. Thank you guys for listening through the break. You've reached the Real Estate Fix. I'm your host, Rich Szerman, on KHTS, FM 98.1, AM 1220, your hometown station. Thank you guys for listening. As promised, we have with us today special guest in studio, Lou Esbin, attorney extraordinaire, friend of the station, friend of the show, my friend. Everybody's friend, the one guy you want if you're in financial trouble, for sure. Bankruptcy attorney primarily, but Lou is nice enough. He gets into real estate matters a lot. We debate these things a lot, he and I. And he was good enough to do a nice deep dive for us, because I asked him to, on the what we're calling now the Sitzer versus NAR case. The case that just came down. The verdict was rendered on Halloween, of all things. And it went very badly for NAR and the other defendants in the case. And I'll get into Lou in a minute. Before I want to talk to you guys about one last thing before we move into that case, just whole hog, because the number of realtors per state I found fascinating. In Florida, there are 220. Florida's got more realtors than any other state in the country, which I think is hysterical. 225,000 realtors. Florida's also the number 9 state as far as the amount of real estate sold. So I think a lot of realtors doing a lot of business there. California's number 2 with 206,000. Texas, number 3, 154,000. And then New York is number 4 at 61,000. I think it's because in New York a lot of attorneys work.
Yeah, but how many of those realtors moved from California?
Yeah, in Texas, probably quite a few, actually. I know dozens of people who've moved to Texas. And in New Jersey, 60,000. So Florida's got the most realtors, California second, Texas third, New York fourth, and New Jersey fifth.
Do you have per capita numbers on sales or revenues?
Well, no, I can tell you that Florida is the 9th, depending where you're looking, it's the 9th or 10th most amount of property sold, both in volume and units, and yet they have the most amount of realtors. Huh. That's ridiculous. California's number 1. We're always number 1 in both volume and in sales, because prices are here and because it's a huge state, and yet we only have 206,000 realtors versus Florida's 225, and that was interesting to me. Texas is number 2, and then New Jersey is number 3. Sorry, New York is number 3, but yet they're doing almost as much business as Texas, a little bit less with half the amount of realtors. I suspect that's because in New York they have a lot of attorneys that act as realtors as well.
Yeah, remember, closings are done with realtors on the East Coast.
Yeah, done with attorneys, yeah, rather than escrow companies, yeah. But let's talk about what we're calling Sitzer versus NAR. Am I saying that right? Am I titling that
Good
right?
enough.
Because Sitzer, Burnett, the NAR case, whatever, because it is making everybody go completely nuts. And so what I'm going to do is ask you to kind of give us a sort of an overview, sort of a simple overview of the case, if you would, because I know you know a lot more about it than I do. And I want to talk about the headlines that have come out of this, but I want you to give us kind of an overview of the case first, and we'll talk about what NBC and everybody else is saying.
Yeah, I think in a nutshell, what the case concerned was we'll use the evil price fixing. That the NAR and its members were fixing prices of commissions at essentially 6%.
Well, that's the theory, yeah.
That is the
judgment. Yeah, not the theory. That was the judge's ruling.
That is the claim, and it's not actually. What's important here is so that in essence is what's going on. Okay, and we have a body of law that deals with these things. It's complicated. The jury decision was one thing, and I shared with you the jury verdict. Okay, so this is a jury of 12 people. Okay, this is not a judge's decision
in Missouri.
Doesn't matter. It's one of the 50 states. Last time I checked.
Yeah, but you know an expression I've never heard?
What's that?
As goes Missouri, goes the world. I've never heard that expression. You know why? Because it's not true. So, with all due respect, and I know laws change this way, I do not see a circumstance, just the reality of it, I do not see a circumstance where 12 people in Missouri get to change the law for the rest of 50 states. And now this is the way the law works. I just think there's going to be something that changes.
Nevertheless, it was federal law.
Fair enough.
Interpreted by U.S. citizens who were duly impaneled on a jury, and you have to respect that.
Of course.
Okay.
I can respectfully think they're wrong.
That's correct. That's what things are about.
Yep.
There's a lot written, and what I did is I went to the source, and before the jury trial, the defendants filed what we refer to as a summary judgment motion, which basically says, Your Honor, based upon the facts, based upon the evidence, based upon the law, you should rule in our favor and against the plaintiff. There's no reason to take this to trial. That's a very simple summary of what a summary judgment motion is. And in a 27-page decision, the judge went through the evidence presented by the defendants, the real estate industry, and found that no, there is enough facts here that are in dispute that this should go to trial. and went through it in painstaking detail. Cited the law, referred to the facts, referred to the testimony, just did a great job of going through and issuing an order denying summary judgment. Now, having practiced law for 40 years and done numerous trials and numerous summary judgment motions, when you as a defendant get that type of result, what you should be doing is pulling up your tents.
Time to settle.
And settling it out.
Yeah, that's what 2 of the 5 defendants did.
I think it was probably a bit of arrogance, because when you look at some of the law firms that represented these parties, they were making a ton of dough.
Well, NAR also doesn't lose a lot of these things often, so the fact that they lost this one in such spectacular fashion. And there's also, there are kind of 2 components to this, I figure, and correct me if you think I'm wrong. There's the legal component, which is what's come out of the court, and will come out of the next cases as well. But then there's also what I'd call the political, or sort of the public component.
Right.
The PR war, if you will.
Right.
And not only, in my view, I know you and I have talked about a little bit about this morning, but in my view, NAR is not only losing right now the legal battle here, but they're also losing the political battle here. Because NAR, it would seem, has sent people out with explicit instructions not to talk about commissions.
Right.
And so when somebody, even at Fox Business, who is not Fox Business Channel, usually not forgive me those of you who like that channel, not exactly a brain trust. There was a guy on Fox this morning who was saying, or when the case first came out, he was saying that he sold his house a year ago and he didn't know commissions were negotiable. This is not somebody you want to get real estate advice from, but yet they put him up there. But anyway, when one of the Fox anchors asked an NAR rep, when NAR was sent to go on Fox, what is the average commission in 2023 that people are paying? The rep wouldn't answer it, or couldn't answer it.
Right.
And that was just dumb. We all know it's 5 to 6%. That's what it is nationwide. That's the number. You Google it, you'll see it. It's not a surprise. But not getting into this argument, trying to sidestep this argument publicly, is just foolish.
Well, as you and I discussed this morning, what wasn't in the order denying summary judgment was any type of testimony or evidence of the work that is done by either a buyer's broker or agent or a seller's broker agent to earn the commission. And if the defendants didn't put that type of evidence in their summary judgment motions, I don't know whether or not they presented that to the jury or whether it really mattered or not. But it seems like that was a real hole that wasn't filled. Now, one of the things I will say, to your point about Missouri, what will happen is that this is a district court decision. It'll go up to the circuit court, okay? And so the circuit court will consider it. What will be important is when it goes to another circuit, right? So, for example, if it goes to the Second Circuit, which is New York, okay, or it comes to the Ninth Circuit, which is California and Nevada and Utah and the massive Ninth Circuit, and the circuits don't agree, okay. At that point, the Supreme Court could take it up and decide which of the circuits is correct or none of them are correct. So this is a process that will take time, and I think that the NAR and the real estate industry needs to look at, okay, how do you posture this so that you do get that split in circuit decisions?
I agree with
and
that.
stop digging in your heels and do what you need to do, because this is disruptive. I mean, every industry goes through disruption.
Oh, sure.
And this is very, very disruptive. It probably will further embolden some of your disruptors that are not tied into NAR and are offering sellers a flat fee amount, and I think that's what will
on
come
that
out of
exact
this.
point, Redfin has already told its people they're a mover in the market. They're
They are.
huge.
They're a disruptor.
They've already said that no more NAR. We're no longer requiring you to be a member of NAR.
Interesting. And
we are
huge.
large enough. Yeah, and Redfin's large enough. Their theory is, and I don't know that I disagree with them, honestly. I don't like it, but I don't disagree with it. Redfin's operating theory seems to be we are large enough as Redfin. We have our own database that sort of mirrors the MLS. Because those of you who are listening, if you don't join NAR and the local boards and all that stuff, you can't post stuff on the MLS. That was also one of the things about the case. The MLS is private.
That's a big deal.
And my problem with the MLS, and I've been getting in trouble with this. I started in real estate in 1989, and my first week in real estate, I got in trouble doing this. So this is a case that's near and dear to my heart, because my first day on the job, when I learned what the MLS was, and I learned there were two different printouts you could get of the MLS, one for realtors and one for the public, and you were not allowed, specifically prohibited, from giving the realtor version to the public, because that has things like commission and stuff on it. And I thought that was ridiculous. I've always thought that disclosure was important, so I would hand that out. The first fine I ever got, and I get fined about once or twice a year by the board. We have an understanding. The first fine I ever got was for handing out the realtor version of the MLS, which I think if there was no realtor version and public version, there was just a version, I don't think that this case exists.
Well, the case would exist, but it may not have gone as bad.
Well, it's hard to make an argument against transparency and disclosure when you are being transparent and disclosing everything. And without the arguments for transparency and disclosure, it's very hard to make a price-fixing argument that would stick. I mean, the biggest problem, I think, in this case was the plaintiffs got a lot of discovery from not NAR, but from the real estate companies.
Well, because they were defendants.
Well, because they were defendants, of course. I'm not saying there was no secret here. They asked for it. They gave it to them. But particularly Keller Williams and what used to be called Realogy. They have some froofy new name, but Realogy, which is one of the biggest companies on the planet, the old Coldwell Banker and everybody else. What they got out of that was a lot of company guidelines that said things like, if a question for a commission comes up, defer.
Right.
Or our office policy is to charge you whatever, quote office, but you can't do that.
Yeah, they had internal memos and policies that really put a nail in their coffin.
Killed them.
Yeah.
Well, if you get 10 people together in a room and you say, or 12 people together in a room and you say, do you think realtors make too much money? It's not hard, especially in a place like Missouri, to get them all go, yeah, realtors make too much, because per deal, they do. But there's so few deals, and that's what people don't get. They do, and I get that. Like a lot of vocations where you have lump sum type deals, when deals go through, it's not over time; it's one chunk at a time. I get that, but when you have memos, internal memos, like in my office, we would never do such a thing. From Keller Williams saying our company policy is 6%. Make sure you tell everybody that, and you are not to violate the company policy. Yeah, I get why they won.
Yeah, it was hard.
And the fact that there was no contra to that, and that the NAR did such a poor job, in my view, of representing what buyer's agents do. I was a strictly buyer's agent for years. I do both. I have buyer's agents on my staff. They work their tails off. A buyer's agent typically, I'm here to tell you, will work harder than a listing agent because you're out running around showing property, you're looking at property. And the gist of it is that I get a lot is, well, I don't need a realtor to find the house. Yeah, you're right, you don't. Especially in the current age when you have Redfins out there, everybody else out, the digital age, everything in the MLS usually goes on the internet, so you don't need a realtor necessarily to find the house. And if you think, as a buyer's agent, that your only job is to find the house, quit now.
Right.
Go find something else to do.
No, there's a lot of work.
There's a ton, and you've got to know how to get through the title stuff and the lending stuff and the disclosure stuff. I mean, California basically asks, and I'm sort of stealing your line here, but California basically asks realtors to act as junior attorneys. And that's kind of a mistake on its face, but that's okay. If you know a lot of realtors, not of them are all of the caliber that can handle that. Many are fine. I hope I count myself among that group, but that's kind of the problem to begin with. And that line between attorney and realtor is kind of fuzzy in our state, as it is in a lot of places in the country. And that's what gives rise to a lot of this stuff. But
the other thing it gives rise to is a lot of litigation.
Yeah, because realtors do it wrong.
They do it wrong.
Yeah,
and I've always said if the California State Bar had not abdicated the role to the real estate industry, you'd probably have a lot less litigation. So I guess that's why they did it, because it gives rise to more litigation.
Expenses probably higher. So basically, so the long and the short of this is, nothing is going to change immediately. This ruling is a big deal. It sets a dangerous precedent, and things could get out of hand very quickly. It could change things in a way that's very, very bad. It could do all sorts of stuff. It could change things in a way they're good. But nothing's happening as of yet. So it's about 3 years to 4 years before we actually have this kind of manifest. And there are a lot of other cases. Right, the minute they got the jury verdict on this case, the same attorneys filed another case that's national. I think it's called Gibson versus National Association of Realtors.
But did they file it in Missouri? Where'd they file it?
I believe this one was actually filed in Missouri, if I'm not mistaken. North Carolina. Is where they sold it. So we'll see what happens. But that's sort of the national version. So the point is, nothing's happening yet, and that's the point. But let me read you, and this is why I like to talk about this stuff, because, oh my God, the headlines. CNN, after $8.1 billion verdict, the clock is ticking on the
8.1 billion?
8.1, is it million?
No. It was 1.27 billion.
Okay. Sorry, I said 8 point. I got it backwards. I got 1.8 billion. Thank you for correcting me. Anyway, the clock is ticking. So their headline was, after 1.8 billion verdict, the clock is ticking on the 6% real estate commission. Fortune magazine, Americans are taxed $60 billion in real estate commissions. They've decided that Fortune has decided that the commission is now a tax, and that everyone in the United States is paying more than they should, and that number is $60 billion. How they got to that math, I have no idea. It was not in the article. The New York Times, jury finds conspiracy among realtors. That's a hell of a headline.
But actually, that's what the statute says, and that's what the court found.
I get where they got it from. Let's see. NBC, home buyers and sellers face uncertain future. I don't even think uncertain about the future, but home sellers and buyers face uncertain futures. Fox, buyer's agent beware. Fox Business, NAR inflating commissions. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that's out there in the media because it's hyperbolic and it makes good copy. But the reality is, while this is an important case, unless you're in the mix of this, it's kind of boring for you right now. I mean, thank you guys for listening. I don't want to say the show's boring, but this isn't going to affect you tomorrow. It's not going to affect you the next day. It's not going to affect anybody for 3 to 4 years. But it may affect us coming down the road. And I think we have much more important things to deal with in real estate market right now than this, but we need to be aware of it.
I think you may see the California Association of Realtors convening some type of commission among themselves.
Oh, that's already happened. It's already underway.
To figure out how to address this issue.
Yeah. Now, in California, unlike, because my first question when I heard the case is, can somebody please get me a copy of a Missouri listing contract? Because I've not seen it. And I took a look at the listing contract, and I get why they chose Missouri. I'll put it to that. Could have done the same thing in Oregon. They also have a similar thing. They don't do enough in that contract, in my view, and we bend over backwards in California to this, to make it clear to all parties, in big, bold type at several places, that commissions are negotiable. They are not set by law. They are not set by a brokerage. They are negotiable.
Right.
Full stop.
Right.
And in California, we go nuts over this because, again, to me, this is an issue that comes down to transparency and disclosure, as most things in real estate do. I've been doing this for 33 years. I've never had a problem. I've never been sued. It's never been an issue.
But I would say that
disclose.
Most consumers would never consider negotiating the commission.
Well, it was rather telling when somebody who's supposed to be a business maven, so much so that he's this genius on Fox Business as part of their roundtable, said, I didn't know commissions were negotiable. And he sold his house in Maryland, and I've seen their contract too, and it says all over it's negotiable.
Yeah.
So please forgive my dig at Fox Business, although there'll be more coming if you listen. I'm not fond of that.
But I think it really depends upon the relationship between the seller and their agent.
Yeah.
I think it depends upon a lot of things, but I would say that the consumer is not savvy enough to understand, because you look at that contract, it's the pages and the small print in the front and the back. It's just it is really overwhelming. I mean, because I've had to review countless of them in court, and you get people up on the stand. They go, I don't know.
Well, it depends. Yeah, it depends on who's doing the contract, who's handling anything. But yeah, the contract is complicated. It's a big issue. It's a lot to deal with. And every time there's another lawsuit that wasn't covered or wasn't properly put together, it creates yet another. The NAR has a ton of realtors working there. A lot of what they do is draft contracts, both in response to the market and to lawsuits, and both trying to prevent them going forward. We'll get a new version for sure of the real estate contract as a result of this. And I'll leave you guys with one last thing, and we'll go to break. But this is how bad it gets sometimes with realtors, and this is going back to asking realtors to act as attorneys. A good realtor, you'll be fine. They know the contract. They know how to fill it out. They've got all kinds of experience. You're fine. But with a bad realtor, like there's one we use as a training thing in my office, where the realtor, and this is a 100% true story, the realtor sent a contract over, left out the address, the purchase price, and the name of the buyer, and was mad when I got her on the phone and I said, hey, I can't present this because you left these things out. Well, why not? Because I'm not going to present the contract that is incomplete. Because all you're going to do is get rejected because it's an incomplete contract. And she, to this day, is still mad at me over this.
Well, one of my frustrations is that the very top of the contract is filled out wrong. The part of the names are wrong.
Yeah, the address it was blank.
Yeah, it's like you know me as Lou, right? But my name is Louis J. Right? That's what should be at the top of the contract.
But this wasn't even that. There was no name was blank. It was complete nonsense. So yeah, there's a certain arrogance and ignorance that goes into the real estate market with agents, because sometimes you can do I did very well very quickly. When I was 19, I did extremely well in real estate, and I was the poster boy for arrogance and ignorance at that age. Now, luckily for me, I grew up and I learned some things. Well, you've known me that long, but I've met the right woman, and she straightened my life out, and thank God she's my wife, and a lot of other people in my life, as you included. So it was very helpful. So I've grown up a bit, but a lot of people haven't. And when you can make that kind of money, with that kind of speed, it can become a problem. Right now that's not an issue because there's so little real estate going on. But I tell you, please stay with us through the breaks.
Sure.
There's a lot of this more stuff I want to cover on this. But let's go to break. Let's hear from some of the sponsors. And thank you guys for listening. You're listening to KHTS, FM 98.1, AM 1220, your hometown station. I'm Rich Szerman, and this is the Real Estate Fix with Rich. We're in with special guest Lou Esbin. Listen to the break. Come back. We'll talk some more. Hello, guys. Thank you for listening. You've reached the Real Estate Fix. I'm your host, Rich Szerman, on KHTS 98.1 FM, AM 1220, your hometown station. We've been talking today about with expert local attorney and my friend and real estate expert, about the latest case with NAR that's come down that had a $1.8 billion judgment against NAR. And a class action, that could be, what, 3 times as much? So it could be over $5 billion, could be the ultimate thing?
No, it was a class action suit, but no, that if they treble damages, it would be that much.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no.
So in other words, it could balloon up over $5 billion. And again, there's no reason to be super hyperbolic about this. Everybody I know in the industry is talking about this. I'm sure you've been getting it as well. Everybody's freaking out, running around like the sky is falling. Nothing is going to change immediately. Nothing's going to change for the next several years. And change is not always bad. You know, and I want to talk, this is why I kept Lou through the break, I want to talk about some of the solutions to this, is how the real estate market might evolve. And I've got a couple of questions that I think lead into this as well that I've gotten from friends of mine and other people who come in on the website. So what happens? So let's say that this now becomes a standard. That what we're looking at is a seller hires a seller's agent and a buyer hires a buyer's agent, and they are paid separately. Now, and I think that's kind of where the case is sort of leading as to the better way to do this. And my problem with that is, especially with first-time buyers, they don't have the money to pay the buyer's agent. Now, theoretically, one of the things I've heard is maybe a buyer could go get a loan plus 3% or plus 2% and use that extra 2% to then pay their agent. Now, the problem that gives rise to immediately is how mortgages are built in the United States. For example, that means no VA buyer can do this. You cannot get commissions paid or much of anything else paid, rightly so, I think, in the current environment, out of a VA loan. So right away, that's not going to work.
So I don't see it that way.
Okay.
I see it that, because when you think about the purchase price, everyone says, well, it comes out of the seller's, right?
Okay, yeah.
But it doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay, because the purchase price is paid by the
buyer.
Yeah. So the buyer and the seller are already sharing the cost. So I don't see that eroding. I don't think that this decision is one that's going to require a buyer to go out and actually upfront the money to. I don't see that happening.
Can't see. The practicality of that. I just don't see it working.
Look, for all the things that you could say about the decision, the market likes consistency.
Yeah.
You know, for example,
all systems
I've litigated in mortgages for years. Okay, and I tell clients, I said, look, the market, the courts don't like change. Okay, and so I think I was the only lawyer to actually get an appellate court to rule against a major lender. Mm-hmm. In one of those cases. Mm-hmm. And I don't see where they're going to upset the paradigm that we currently have. Because you have mortgages built on it, you've got lending built on it. There's too many things that are based upon the model that there's going to be a resistance overall to change. So I don't see that. I think that you're still going to get a purchase price. The purchase price is going to include and reflect the commission split. I think what this decision comes out and says is that you cannot force someone to be on your multiple listing service and control what they're charging. I think that's more to what the decision is talking about, and what possible harm to the public there is from that. At least that's what I saw it as.
Well, I think at the end of the day, and I keep coming back to these same two words, transparency and disclosure. I've been a proponent of this since my first day in the business. I think the idea that there is a public MLS and a realtor MLS should be abolished. It should just be abolished. The MLS should be the MLS. It should be the central data source, and the public should be able to see what the commission offered is.
So then the question becomes, who then controls the MLS? Do they set it up so maybe you have a nonprofit that runs the MLS because it's a general database for the entire country, and then people can access that data? So these are things that you have to think about, is that if you take the MLS out of the industry's control and you just make it as a database, like Redfin says, well, we have our own database, we don't need it, right? So maybe that's where things will go.
Yeah, but there has to be some sort of statewide or national standard for the data. And Redfin's not going to do that. What you do is you replace a purported cabal that is NAR with a different cabal that is now Redfin.
Yes, but if all of a sudden you say, well, the government should control, then you get into the S word.
Use the existing framework that's there. Just make it more open.
Well, that's right. If there's
the simplest solution,
anyone should be able to go and log into the MLS and see what a listing is.
Yeah, well, they can do that now. The problem is they can't see what the commissions are. Because when
How-
you don't
how-
log into the MLS, you type the any area, because Realtor.com is what sort of serves as the public
Okay,
face of the
okay.
MLS. So it goes to the MLS and exports to Realtor.com. But stuff like the commission gets filtered out by the time it gets to Realtor.com.
Okay.
If I go to the MLS and I choose a customer report, it will not have the buyer's agent's commission. And I think that is the crux of the problem. Just
I
put
think
the darn
that's the
commission
problem.
in there.
I
Just
agree
put
with
the
you.
commission in there.
I think that's the
I
problem.
disclose it all the time. We all should. So I think, it comes back to this disclosure. If we disclose, we do a pretty good job of that in California. But if you just disclose, I think the buyer has a right to know how much their agent's being paid. I've thought that since day one, so it's not an issue for me. And I understand where the judge and the jury is coming from here. I just think they were wrong-headed into the implementation of the ruling, and the implementation is going to be interesting. But just disclose it. Let everybody know everything. That's it. Job done. I think that ends the thing for everybody. Commissions are negotiable, and once they have been negotiated, they should be made public. That's how that works.
But these issues should have arisen before the jury came out
We're always
and
a little
after
slow
the summary judgment motion.
Yeah, we're always slow on these things. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. You've been listening to The Real Estate Fix with Rich. I'm your host, Rich Szerman, on KHTS, FM 98.1, AM 1220, your hometown station. It's been a great day. Thank you, guys. Be good humans. Happy Veterans Day to the veterans out there. I'll see you all at Magic Mountain. Thank you, guys, for listening. Have a great week.